who's probably really identified with the cartoon character. He's at a cocktail party, and there are little thought bubbles coming up out of his head, and the caption is, "Yikes, adults." And so I feel like, yikes, colleagues. So be kind to me. I'd like to go a different direction than Rebecca. She did a magnificent job, I think, of showing us how we can export research that's actually done in the classroom to an external community. I'm going to talk about a different directionality, importing the research we do into our classroom. And so what I want to do is deal with a case study, and the case study is a case study of one, moi. Let me set the stage by telling you about my own reinvention of myself. And by the way, I think this is one of the great things about ULR. I have been able to reinvent myself several times. I've gotten interested in different things, and I haven't been forced to stick to a rigid research agenda. And I need that. I love to learn, and so when I find a new area that I want to move into, I like to do that. This project I want to talk about began because of my daughter. She lives in Florence, Italy. And my area, by the way, is discourse linguistics, and most of my published work had to do with discourse analysis, rhetorical analysis, things like that. But I was on a trip to Italy. Amy introduced me to a good friend of hers who was a Dante scholar, and we were sitting in a little coffee bar, and I said to Max, as it's going to be called, who should I be interested in terms of great rhetoricians from Italy? I know about Cicero, I know about Quintilian, and he didn't drop a beat. He said, "Oh, that's easy, Brunetto Latini." And I said, "Who?" And I should have remembered, because at one point in my career, in my life, I read Dante's Inferno, and Brunetto Latini was Dante's teacher. And Dante, guided by Virgil, is walking along through hell, comes to the seventh circle of hell, and there is his own teacher in hell. You know, so remembering that, I was thinking, golly, Brunetto Latini was a great rhetorician, someone really important. So I went back and I read the 15th canto of the Inferno, and the treatment that Dante gives to his teacher, who's now in hell, is amazing, because basically he says, "Ser Brunetto, what are you doing here in hell?" And of course Dante had put him in hell. So as a teacher, it was a teacherly impulse that drew me to this mysterious character, Brunetto Latini. I wanted to get him out of hell. I thought, this is terrible. This brilliant student has put his own teacher in hell. And that led to my research interest in this character, who does not show up in American versions of rhetorical history. He's all over the place in Europe. So I thought, what a little window to go through and do research concerning. So what I want to do is talk about the importation of our research projects in the classroom. And I also want to ask some essential questions. So I'm going to just spend a little time talking about how I think my work with Latini served as a way of importing research into the classroom, perhaps inspiring students, but especially I want to have us talk a little bit. So in your kindness to me, I hope you will answer some of the essential questions that I posed on this particular handout. I looked at the phases of this project, and phase one for me was finding a new research agenda. I'm not a medievalist. My training is in linguistics, and I so like, do I even have the authority to move into this field? And what I realized was I'm mainly a learner. I love to learn. So I thought I'll approach this as a learner, not as a brilliant medieval scholar. And I'll start from that point of view. And I started investigating more and more his life and his great rhetorical treatise called the Livre du Tresor, and became convinced that Max was right. This guy was a major rhetorician. His work influenced people all over Europe, especially in the 13th century. So, that's pretty cool. Why don't Americans have this guy on the radar? Did Dante's Damnation obscure him completely? So that was the first stage. And I got so passionate about this that I decided I wanted to develop a special topics course which would link Cicero, the great Roman orator who was Latini's hero, wanted to link them together and also bring in Dante. So I taught a special topics course. And what I did was I brought work in progress, put in front of my students, work that I was doing on Latini. And I asked them to be collaborators with me, to actually give me feedback that might guide me as I move the work toward being a manuscript. And from their accounts, this was invaluable because they were seeing a wannabe scholar really trying to struggle through a scholarly issue. And they, by the way, were able to give great feedback. So on your handout, there's one little place, it's a pretty poor representation, but I actually included in my book, which was finally published in 2006, Searching for Latini, I included an acknowledgement section concerning those students who had actually helped me produce the manuscript. So this was really important to me. Again, my initial interest was prompted by the fact that Latini was a teacher. I wanted my students to join with me in my own passion for this particular topic, which was growing larger and larger. So there was the special topics class. Phase 3 involved drafting a manuscript and soliciting student feedback. Phase 4, crediting students and publishing the manuscript. But I want to go on to phase 5, developing strategies from research for use with other classes, consideration of Latini in courses on rhetorical theory, use of Ciceronian strategies in teaching and persuasive writing. Well, in my research, I'd already known about this. Cicero proposed an arrangement strategy for persuasion that is way cool. It's just way cool. It's too cool. I've got to share it with you. In fact, it's on the handout. It's called the Ciceronian arrangement strategy. And Latini takes this strategy and applies it not to speaking but to writing. And I love this. And I've talked to colleagues in many different disciplines who tell me, yes, this is what I want my students to be able to do. So here's what Cicero, via Latini, brought to me. This arrangement strategy where any given academic paper would start with a problem statement. There'd be some background information, a claim. We all want thesis statement. I like the word claim better as a rhetorician. We want arguments from our students, a lot of us. The more well-developed student, I think, is aware of the potential counterarguments and speaks to those. And finally, there's a kind of action close. So, I thought this was great. From this research, I stole a strategy that I use in each and every one of my persuasive writing classes as a kind of default for writing persuasively. It's not over yet. Phase 6. This is the Julia Bolton Holloway UAR. I was a student, and the mentor that I found in Florence was Julia Bolton Holloway. Brilliant, world-renowned medievalist. And for some reason, she took pity on me and decided to help me as I searched for Latini. She became my mentor and teacher. Exhilarating to become a student. Absolutely exhilarating. And Julia got so interested in my project that she agreed to come to ULR and speak to our students and faculty. So there was another sort of benefit of this whole business of trying to get students involved in the research I was doing. And then finally, Carol Thompson and I are considering proposing a study abroad course where we'll take students, if it goes well, 10 of them, to Florence, and deal especially with the problem of empowerment. Latini, more than anything else, was an advocate of vernacular literacy. Dante got that from his teacher. So Julia, who's this great scholar, she was at Princeton, went out on her own, now she superintends the English Cemetery in Florence, is deeply involved in literacy projects for the Roma, or the Gypsies of Florence. So we wanted our students to be able to see how her commitment to vernacular literacy, in fact, would impact a group in here and now. So that's sort of in the future, but it just keeps going. I wanted to make a couple of observations about this business of importing our own work, scholarly work, into the classroom. Go to the next board. I think I'm going in a different direction. Back up. I routinely try to get students to co-op. And I think that is a great thing to do. I can't do it all the time, but every once in a while a student says, hey, I really want to write about this topic with you. And I actually had success in terms of publishing an article that was co-authored with a student. So that's still another way of attempting to meld research with teaching. Other things that I've done in the past in terms of importing my own work, scholarly work, to classes, I've actually shared my writing with students in writing classes. And the reason I do that, and if you're a cognitivist, you'll recognize the motive immediately, is that I want them to start developing the cognitive schemas that would enable them to write the kind of writing that I do. So it's not a gesture like, hey, I really know what I'm doing and you don't, and this is what you should produce. It's more like, I tell them about the struggle that went into, and as you know, if you've done research, it's always a struggle. The struggle that went into production of that published product. And I find that's, at first I was really nervous about doing this. It's like, you're sure I'm going to work with my students. They'll see me as a fraud for sure. It's not going to work. But I found it was just the opposite. That in fact, students looked to me as someone who was actually doing what I was asking them to do when I asked for instance, research paper. So with those preliminary remarks, I'd really like to turn to what my colleague Brad Minnick calls essential questions. I actually stole that language from the essential questions. And please be kind to me and talk. So let's go through some of these questions. Should we share research in progress with our students? Why? How? Good idea? Bad idea? What are some of your thoughts? Kindness, please. Gail.
Well, just another slight twist on this is even with graduate students, sometimes I have problems getting them to look critically at the rubric that I give them and apply it to their own paper.
Yes.
And you just inspired me that perhaps I'll take an article I'm about to submit, give it to them, ask them to apply the rubric to my paper. So at least I'll know they've read the rubric before they submit it.
Very good idea, I think. If teaching has something to do with modeling, and I think it does, this is a form of modeling. I'm doing what I'm asking you to do. Also, I think it's an ethos building or authority building thing that we can do with students, where they say, okay, this crazy, balding, bearded, spectacled person is just asking me to do this for the hell of it. He actually does it himself. And he's willing to even talk about the problems and complications of doing such research, which I think our students need to know about. Any more observations? Gerald?
You picked up on something that I think is key. Before sharing publish, being willing to share drafts and in progress.
Yes.
That's I can tell students 1,000 times that good writing is rewriting, but how well do I model that for them? I mean, I'm not telling this document went through 20 drafts and people shredded it every time. But I said, go ahead and show them one of the early drafts, you know, and I think that can do a lot of things. I mean, writing is ultimately a humbling affair.
It really is.
And so I appreciate the encouragement.
By the way, in my teaching of writing, I find that teaching students to revise is one of the most difficult things to do. Most of them have not had revising experiences when they enter ULR. So with the special topics course, when I solicited the feedback and actually showed them that I used their feedback in revision, again, I was trying to model that process and acknowledge that it's part of my process as well. I don't just publish something without going through revising editorial processes. Let's go on and take on a few more of these questions because I think my time is coming to an end pretty soon. I think we pretty much covered the first two, so let's go to the third. Should we plan formal research that might feed directly into extant or new courses? In other words, we have research in various times. Should we even be thinking about how could I use this research, the scholarly research that I'm doing, so that I can employ it into my class? My students can see what I'm doing and be part of it. Good idea? Bad idea? Experiences with this?
Not. I can't have any objections. Just write off the top.
So again, going at this from this different direction, I really think that's a cool idea to try to bring in, to try to import it. I'm disturbed by our culture, our research culture here, because I have some questions that are not, they've not been answered for me. I think what Rebecca was talking about is so important to what we're doing, but I just don't know how our administration sees this. Are we supposed to be doing books like Searching for Lakini, which are more sort of outside of the classroom? Are we supposed to be doing action research in our classrooms? What are your feelings about this? And what kind of a culture would you like to be part of? Research culture. Yes?
I just don't want it to be either or.
Okay.
I don't want it to be a have to. I want it to be what is my interest at the time, because I think it would be good to do this, but I might have a research interest that isn't like this. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't want them to be telling me what my interest has to be.
But I feel very strongly, and maybe some of you agree, that the kind of work Rebecca's doing is invaluable.
Right.
Absolutely invaluable, and should be included under our
Sure.
definition of research.
I agree, but I don't want somebody telling me it has to be.
Yes, right. So both and rather than either or.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like it too. Earl?
I think that that hint of fear you expressed is common on the campus, and I really think it's pretty much groundless. There may be chairs or department committees or deans that frown upon certain kinds of research, but ever since I've been here, which is I think longer than anyone in the room, I think everything people have done has counted. And I don't think we're at a point yet where people are saying that doesn't count for what it does. So I think everything is welcome. The Boyer model has been front and center for 25 years or more. The Roles and Rewards Task Force identified this kind of research as well as more traditional research. So I think people should do what they want, and they'll be rewarded.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few more questions, essential questions. How about including students in our own scholarly projects? Good idea, bad idea? Your feelings?
I may be slow here, maybe I'm asking the question I should have asked a while ago. One problem with and it just happened to one of my students. I might feel like what I do I know very well, but I have students who know more in other areas. And it so happened that somebody took a course, and the requirement was you have to be able to publish a paper at the end of this course. And the student was not able to. So it's a good idea to include research, but how do you balance it? Because at some point, it wasn't the students' area, and they wanted to publish a paper in the teacher's kind of research.
Right.
So it's almost like you're using them for free, and you use the classroom as a way to force them to do something. It would be rather than, let's talk about it outside, and if you want some research, we can do it outside. How do you balance it?
Good question. I want to believe that it's a good idea that we often encourage, when asking for papers from students, often encourage those students to see them as potentially publishable papers, so that they're not just writing for the teacher. They're actually thinking about publication. It might not happen, but it reframes everything, it seems to me, and puts them more in sync with what we really do as academics and scholars.
I just wanted to share that in my law program, we were required to do 2 research projects prior to the dissertation, but the requirement was that they were submitted for publication. They did not have to be accepted to do a course credit. So I think it kind of went what you were going at, but it protected the students that did a decent job, but just weren't able to do publication.
Yeah. Thanks.
The other thing that is an overall comment that cuts across these essential questions is that I appreciate that you're modeling the process of moving through a project. And I think in particular, the narrative at the start is something students don't often hear. They just assume you're a nerd looking at nerdy questions.
I'm sure
That's all they know. But they don't know. Yeah, and I'm fine with that, but they need to know some of the serendipities.
Yeah.
That means wherever you are with the project, but know where some of the passions come from as well.
Passion, exactly.
And that's,
Research
that,
passion.
at least my exposure going through so much of school, is I didn't get that. I mean, it's just, these are articles that are being written, these are people that are interested in these topics. And for some reason, we don't get modeled for us what I think will often light a fire for a student.
Research passion. Yeah. Well, I'm quite
I
friend.
was just going to say, I like what Rebecca brought up about service learning, and to kind of address this question about if you can get the students doing some things in conjunction with your class, but outside of the class, in the community, and then they can write about it, become somewhat expert on it, you can write about it with them. And not necessarily tied to the class, but it becomes something out of the class.
Got the tripod, but it's quite
That's
long.
one way I think we can get them involved in service initiatives, not only related to your class.
Great idea. Thank you. My time's up. Thank you very much.
Don't forget to sign the sheet. Carol, are you going to say a couple of words?
Well, I was just going to thank you all for coming. I'm just kind of overwhelmed today. I think it's a wonderful session. It's on a topic that's important and dear to all of our lives. We have a couple of sessions coming up in the future. We'll be notifying you about those shortly. But more importantly, we're bringing back Mary Ellen Weimer. She's going to be here on the 29th. So if you've got your calendar, sketch out that day. Because she's going to be doing a workshop in the morning. She's going to be doing a keynote address at 1 o'clock. And she'll be doing another discussion sort of session in the afternoon. So we'll have her throughout the day, and you don't have to come to all the sessions, but we'll be letting you know exactly where and when and all the details about that as the week goes by. So please do mark the 29th. And thank you again for coming. This is wonderful. We appreciate it.